And this has enormous implications for learning of motor skills, for unlearning of traumatic events, or for processing emotionally challenging as well as emotionally pleasing events. And as we'll see, one can actually leverage their daytime activities in order to access more slow-wave sleep, or non-REM sleep as we'll call it, or more REM sleep, depending on your particular emotional and physical needs. So it's really a remarkable stage of life that we have a lot more control and power over than you might believe.
What if you are not talking enough sleep? Will it affect your cognitive abilities and the things you have learned? Well, the interesting thing is sleep has science behind it, and if you are not getting enough sleep, you might be losing a lot. You might feel you can retain all information and perform exceptionally without taking sufficient sleep. However, you are making your brain less intellectual. Believe us, missing parts of sleep can cost you more than you can think. So, is it true that sleep has many parts associated with developing different capabilities in a human? Welcome back to another health and science-filled episode of NeuroDairy. In this video, we will uncover the science behind dreams and sleep to learn and achieve high performance. Let's get started.
So slow-wave sleep is characterized by a particular pattern of brain activity in which the brain is metabolically active, but that there's these big sweeping waves of activity that include a lot of the brain. If you want to look this up, there you can find evidence for sweeping of waves of neural activity across association cortex, across big swaths of the brainstem, the so-called pons geniculate occipital pathway. This is brainstem, thalamus, and then cortex, for those of you that are interested, although more of that is going to occur in REM sleep. Now, the interesting thing about slow-wave sleep, the neuromodulators that tend to be associated with it, that are most active and least active during slow-wave sleep. And here's why. To remind you, neuromodulators are these chemicals that act rather slowly, but their main role is to bias particular brain circuits to be active and other brain circuits to not be active. These are like the music playlist. So think of neuromodulators, and these come in the names of acetylcholine, norepinephrine, serotonin, and dopamine. Think of them as suggesting playlists on your audio device. So, classical music is distinctly different in feel and tone and a number of other features from like third wave punk or from hip hop, right? So think of them as biasing toward particular genres of neural circuit activity, okay? Mellow music versus really aggressive fast music, or rhythmic music that includes lyrics versus rhythmic music that doesn't include lyrics. That's more or less the way to think about these neuromodulators. And they are associated as a consequence with certain brain functions. So we know, for instance, and just to review, acetylcholine in waking states is a neuromodulator that tends to amplify the activity of brain circuits associated with focus and attention. Norepinephrine is a neuromodulator that tends to amplify the brain circuits associated with alertness and the desire to move. Serotonin is the neuromodulator that's released and tends to amplify the circuits in the brain and body that are associated with bliss and the desire to remain still. And dopamine is the neuromodulator that's released and is associated with amplification of the neural circuits in the brain and body associated with pursuing goals and pleasure and reward. Okay? So in slow-wave sleep, something really interesting happens. There's essentially no acetylcholine. Acetylcholine production and release and action from the two major sites, which are in the brainstem, which from a nucleus, if it's a parabigeminal nucleus, if you really want to know, or from the forebrain, which is nucleus basalis. And you don't need to know these names, but if you like, that's why I put them out there. Acetylcholine production plummets. It's just almost to zero. And acetylcholine, as I just mentioned, is associated with focus. So you can think of slow-wave sleep as these big sweeping waves of activity through the brain and a kind of distortion of space and time so that we're not really focusing on any one thing. Now, the other molecules that are very active at that time are norepinephrine, which is a little bit surprising because normally in waking states, norepinephrine is going to be associated with a lot of alertness and the desire to move. But there's not a ton of norepinephrine around in slow wave sleep, but it is around. So there's something associated with the movement circuitry going on in slow wave sleep. And remember, this is happening mostly at the beginning of the night. Your sleep is dominated by slow wave sleep. So no acetylcholine, very little norepinephrine, although there is some, and a lot of serotonin. And serotonin, again, is associated with this desire, this sensation of kind of bliss or well-being, but not a lot of movement. And during sleep, you tend not to move. Now, in slow-wave sleep, you can move. You're not paralyzed, so you can roll over. If people are going to sleepwalk, typically it's going to be during slow-wave sleep. And what studies have shown through some kind of sadistic experiments where people are deprived specifically of slow-wave sleep, and that can be done by waking them up as soon as the electrode recordings show that they're in slow-wave sleep, or by chemically altering their sleep so that it biases them away from slow-wave sleep. What studies have shown is that motor learning is generally occurring in slow-wave sleep. So let's say the day before you go to sleep, you were learning some new dance move, or you were learning some specific motor skill, either a fine motor skill or a coarse motor skill. So let's say it's a new form of exercise or some new coordinated movements. This could be coordinated movement at the level of the fingers, or it could be coordinated movement at the level of the whole body and large limb movements. It could involve other people, or it could be a solo activity. Learning of those skills is happening primarily during slow wave sleep in the early part of the night. In addition, slow wave sleep has been shown to be important for the learning of detailed information. Now, this isn't always cognitive information. We're going to talk about cognitive information, but the studies that have been done along these lines involve having people learn very detailed information about very specific rules and the way that certain words are spelled. They tend to be challenging words. So if people are tested in terms of their performance on these types of exams and they're deprived of slow wave sleep, they tend to perform very poorly. So we can think of slow wave sleep as important for motor learning, motor skill learning, and for the learning of specific details about specific events. And this turns out to be fundamentally important because now we know that slow wave sleep is primarily in the early part of the night, and motor learning is occurring primarily early in the night, and detail learning is occurring early in the night. Now, for those of you that are waking up after only 3-4 hours of sleep, this might be informative. This might tell you a little something about what you are able to learn and not able to learn if that were to be the only sleep that you get, although hopefully that's not the only sleep that you get. But we're going to dive deep into how it is that one can maximize motor learning in order to extract, say, more detailed information about coordinated movements and how to make them faster or slower. So that might be important for certain sports. It might be almost certainly important for certain sports. It's going to be important for any kind of coordinated movement, like, say, learning to play the piano, or, for instance, how to learn synchronized movements with somebody else. So maybe I mentioned the example of dance earlier. If you, like me, a few years ago, I set out to learn tango because I have some Argentine relatives, and I was abysmal. I need to return to that at some point. I was just abysmal. And one of the worst things about being abysmal at learning dance is that somebody else has to suffer the consequences also. So I don't know, maybe in the month on neuroplasticity, I'll explore that again as a self-experimentation. But the key things to know are slow wave sleep is involved in motor learning and detailed learning. There's no acetylcholine around at that time, has this big amplitude activity sweeping throughout the brain, and that there's the release of these neuromodulators, norepinephrine and serotonin. And again, that's all happening early in the night. So athletes, people that are concerned about performance, if you happen to wake up after just a couple hours of, 3-4 hours of sleep because you're excited about a competition the next day, presumably if you've already trained the skills that you need for the event, you should be fine to engage in that particular activity. Now, it's always going to be better to get a full night's sleep. And, a full night's sleep if for you is 6 hours, then it's always going to be better to get more sleep than it is to get less. However, I think some people get a little bit overly concerned that if they didn't get their full night's sleep before some sort of physical event, that their performance is going to plummet. Presumably, if you've already learned what you need to do and it's stored in your neural circuits and you know how to make those coordinated movements, what the literature on slow wave sleep suggests is that you would be replenished, that the motor learning and the recovery from exercise is going to happen early in the night. Okay? So we'll just pause there and kind of shelve that for a moment, and then we're going to come back to it. But I want to talk about REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep. REM sleep and rapid eye movement sleep, as I mentioned before, occurs throughout the night, but you're going to have more of it. A larger percentage of these 90-minute sleep cycles is going to be comprised of REM sleep as you get toward morning. REM sleep is fascinating. It was discovered in the 50s when a sleep laboratory in Chicago, the researchers observed that people's eyes were moving under their eyelids. Now, something very important that we're going to address when we talk about trauma later is that the eye movements are not just side to side. They're very erratic in all different directions. One thing that I don't think anyone, I've never heard anyone really talk about publicly is why eye movements during sleep. Right? Eyes are closed, and sometimes people's eyelids will be a little bit open and their eyes are darting around, especially in little kids. I don't suggest you do this. I'm not even sure it's ethical, but it has been done where you pull back the eyelids of a kid while they're sleeping and their eyes are kind of darting all over the place. I think people do this to their passed out friends at parties and things like that. So again, I don't suggest you do it, but I'm telling you it because it's been done before and therefore you don't have to do it again. But rapid eye movement sleep is fascinating and occurs because there are connections between the brainstem, an area called the pons, and areas of the thalamus and the top of the brainstem that are involved in generating movements in different directions, sometimes called saccades, although sometimes during rapid eye movement sleep, it's not just rapid, it's kind of a jittery side-to-side thing, and then the eyeballs kind of roll. It's really pretty creepy to look at if you see. So what's happening there is the circuitry that is involved in conscious eye movements is kind of going haywire, but it's not haywire. It's these waves of activity from the brainstem up to the so-called thalamus, which is an area that filters sensory information, and then up to the cortex. And the cortex, of course, is involved in conscious perceptions. So in rapid eye movement sleep, there are a couple things that are happening besides rapid eye movements. The main ones are that they're in contrast to slow wave sleep. In REM sleep, serotonin is essentially absent. Okay, so this molecule, this neuromodulator that tends to create the feeling of bliss and well-being and just calm, placidity, is absent. All right, so that's interesting. In addition to that, norepinephrine, this molecule that's involved in movement and alertness, is absolutely absent. It's probably one of the few times in our life that epinephrine is essentially at zero activity within our system. And that has a number of very important implications for the sorts of dreaming that occur during REM sleep and the sorts of learning that can occur in REM sleep and unlearning.
Dr. Andrew Huberman, professor of neurobiology and ophthalmology at Stanford University School of Medicine, says that when you sleep, you actually take 90-minute naps where you enter one cycle after another. Each cycle has its own distinctions, which you can use in your favor. For example, during the first 90 minutes of your sleep, your brain fluctuates between high and low activity. However, after this 90-minute cycle, your brain becomes more consistently active, achieving more focus and detailed learning. After understanding this, you can use it in your favor. Now, note that the first 90 minutes is the time you can use to develop intelligence and solve the problems you are having during the day with more cognitive capability. In other words, while you sleep, you are awake and working. During these first 90 minutes of your sleep, hormones that increase focus, activeness, and intelligence are released. Now, before you sleep, you can think about the problem you want to solve until you fall asleep. Perhaps in your first 90 minutes of sleep, you will think about that problem or thing with more intelligence in a sort of dream. Now, if someone is deprived of this sleep or is prevented from sleep, they can be made to lose the intelligence they could equip otherwise. Hence, you are compromising your mental power if you are not sleeping during the night. This early stage sleep of 90 minutes, if compromised, can result in poor performance because you have not gotten yourself into detailed focus at all. The time you could give in learning while you sleep has been lost. You might feel you can just take 3 to 4 hours sleep and equip yourself well, But that's not the case due to the phenomenal REM, or rapid eye movement sleep, which starts afterwards. In this stage, your eyes behind the eyelids move rapidly, and your brain is more consistently active than in the earlier stage of sleep. Hence, the more you sleep, the more you get into rapid eye movement sleep, where your mind is more active. If you are recalling the important things before you sleep, you could work on them while you sleep, as if you are in a dream. Do you think we can learn and unlearn by understanding sleep and dreams better? Here's the secret. The more you sleep, the more you can develop your cognitive capabilities and learn the things you were doing during the daytime. Comment right below in the comment section. Have you tried learning something using dreams? Would you like to watch more videos on neuroscience and health? If yes, subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon to get the notification when we post the next episode. Thanks for watching, and until the next episode, stay tuned.